There are many strengths for this Atlanta Braves team, from their power pitching to their power hitting, but what are the weaknesses and concerns that could hold this team back in 2025? We'll discuss all of that on today's episode of Locked On Braves, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast on X at LockedOn_Braves and on Instagram at Locked On Braves. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube if you are new. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. On today's podcast, we're going to look at the biggest weaknesses and strengths for this Atlanta Braves team going into 2025. We'll also discuss Chris Sale's outing on Tuesday with Drake Baldwin catching him behind the plate and some of Sale's comments on Baldwin after that. And we'll get into much more on today's episode of Locked On Braves. Well, I do this every spring training. I like to go through the strengths and the weaknesses of this team to kind of point out what to look for throughout the season. I said last year, if I go back and listen, really the only big concern was going to be injuries. And that's exactly what held the Braves back. Now, another thing that I've always had concerns with this offense is that it is so power prone, is that if that power is taken away, how do they score runs? Can they find other ways to score runs? And that's really what plagued the Braves last year. But there are a lot of strengths with this team. I don't want to get too bogged down looking at the weaknesses. We as fans like to focus so much on the areas of concern, the areas of weakness for this Braves team, but there are a lot of strengths for this Braves team. In fact, if you look at FanGraphs depth chart projections, the Braves are expected to have a top 5 offensive position or offense and pitching staff. So just all together, top 5 offense, top 5 pitching staff based on FanGraphs projections. And even the bullpen is projected to finish 9th, what many would consider to be the Braves' biggest area of weakness. So looking at the group context, Braves really don't have any weaknesses. I mean, you're talking about, on paper, a team that's an offense projected to finish in the top 5, and a pitching staff projected to finish in the top 5, and a bullpen projected to finish in the top 10. So there are really no major weaknesses from a group context on this Braves team. But if you break it down position by position, that's where we can kind of see some areas of concern and some weaknesses for this Atlanta Braves team. And unfortunately, the first weakness we have to talk about is shortstop. As David Thrash says, shortstop is the biggest weakness. And it is. Don't get me wrong. But it's the biggest weakness on a team, and it's really your only weakness positionally, I think. And it's your number 9 hitter who's going to give you above average defense at a premium defensive position at shortstop. So again, most teams would love to just have one weakness. Many people consider it to be a major weakness because Orlando Arcia was so bad with the bat last year. He still gave you really good defense, and I suspect that he will again. But yes, the Braves are projected to finish 29th in F WAR according to FanGraphs projections. There's 30 teams in baseball. The only team projected to have a worse shortstop than the Atlanta Braves this year is the White Sox. So certainly shortstop is a very weak spot for the Atlanta Braves. There is no denying that. Even the biggest Orlando Arcia lover out there has to understand that is the Braves' biggest weakness. But as I pointed out, and as Jeff Perry's pointing out in the comment section, the defense is still good. And again, if he's going to bat 9th, you do need a little bit more offense. You can't be one of the worst offensive hitters in the league again. But if Arcia can get back to just being a 90 WRC plus, 90, 95 WRC plus bat and give you above average defense, it's going to be fine. It's not having one major weakness in your position player group is not going to wreck a team's season if everybody else does what they're supposed to do. Now, left field is the only other position that isn't projected to finish in the top 10. And that's mostly due to the projections not really catching up, factoring in, buying into what Jurickson Profar did last year and the swing changes that he made. Certainly, if those hold true and he's anywhere close to where he was last year, he's going to finish top 10 in left field, if not higher than that. They have the Braves projected to finish 21st in F4 at left field this year. Interestingly enough, right behind the Dodgers. But again, I'm much more optimistic in Profar and his changes last year, sticking to where he's, I think, at minimum going to be top 15 at the position next year. I don't really consider that a weakness, even though the projections do. So I think there's only one, looking at it position player wise, there's really only one true weakness for this Atlanta Braves team going into the season. And again, Arcia still gives you above average defense at a premium defensive position. So if you go just beyond the players, because again, only one true weakness at the position players, I think the pitching staff, yes, it can be top heavy and you can get the depth is a little bit scary, but I think you could say that about every team out there. But just looking at the players, really it's only shortstop that is a major weakness for the Braves. But areas of concern, despite being projected as, a top 10 bullpen, I do think it's the biggest area of weakness and concern for the Atlanta Braves going into the season, which is not something we've been able to say about Alex Anthopoulos' team since 2019. He has gone above and beyond to shore up a bullpen in the offseason, and for whatever case, and it's not done yet, he just hasn't done that this year. I mean, there still are some names out there, mainly David Robertson, that he could go get, and it would certainly help a lot. And this bullpen still could be really good. It's just there's a lot of question marks. While I feel confident in Iglesias, Johnson, Bummer, and Lee, the rest are a bit unknown. We're all kind of assuming that Daysbel Hernandez is going to take that next step and be a setup guy, but he hasn't done it yet. Yes, the numbers last year were good, but it was mostly in lower leverage situations. Perdomo hasn't pitched at the big league level in a while. We're all kind of hoping that he comes back and he's that 13 K per 9 pitcher. PR has never pitched at the big league level, the Rule 5 draft pick for the Braves. We're kind of hoping that what he did in the minors last year is legitimate and carries over into a big league role for the Atlanta Braves. And look, while I'm excited about the potential of a Hector Neris, a Buck Farmer, a Jordan Weems, a Jake Diekman, those guys didn't get big league contracts for a reason. So again, I think this bullpen could be good, but there certainly are some question marks outside of the big four. And look, there could be some question marks inside of that big four as well. Iglesias, is 35 years old now, and he's not exactly a dominant type of closer. Again, I love Raisel Iglesias. I think he's going to be fine, but I think you have to acknowledge that, he's getting into his mid to late 30s, towards the tail end of his career. When is that drop off going to happen for him? I didn't like the second half for Pierce Johnson last year. I thought he became a little bit more too predictable with that curveball. Does he do some things to kind of switch things up? He had a 4.03 ERA and a 1.31 whip in the second half last year. Not terrible by any means, but certainly felt a little bit more shaky in that setup role for a guy who's most likely going to be your primary setup pitcher going against the other team's middle of the order in the 7th and 8th innings. So we want something that's a little bit more solid than that. I mean, if Joe Jimenez were healthy, he would be ahead of Pierce Johnson in the pecking order. So now you're moving Johnson up a spot where I don't know that I feel quite as comfortable with him. And while I like Aaron Bummer and his peripherals and underlying metrics always say that he should be better than he is, for whatever reason, he's not. I mean, he might just be one of the most unluckiest people in the world, but things seem to always go against him. And he always has a high whip. There's runners on base. Part of that's just being, a ground ball type of pitcher, and that's going to happen. But when that is the case, things tend to go wrong sometimes. So again, I like this Braves bullpen. I think it could be really good. I think it could be top 10, like the projections say, but I do think we have to realize and understand that there's a situation, there is a path where things could go really wrong in the Braves bullpen. And that's why I think it is their biggest weakness and area of concern. And a couple other things, it's really out of their control, but how are baseballs traveling this year? We never know from year to year, especially early in the season when baseballs aren't traveling as much as they are anyway. If healthy, it likely doesn't matter. But again, that is something that we saw last season when not just Braves, but all around baseball, really good hitters were struggling as the baseballs weren't traveling as much, and they typically don't in the first 2 to 3 months of the season. So can the Braves score in other ways. And that's really what you're looking for. Riley, Olsen, Murphy, Ozuna, and Kelnick, they're all projected to have a K rate over 23%. Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies, Sean Murphy, Arcia, and Kelnick are projected to have on-base percentages under 330. You like to be a little bit better in both of those areas. Only 3 players are projected to steal double-digit bases, and only Acuna is expected to steal more than 20. So again, if that home run power is not there, then you got 4 or 5 guys in your lineup that are going to strike out over 23% of the time. You have 5 guys in your lineup that are going to get on base under 33% of the time. You have 7 guys in your lineup who are basically a non-factor in steals. So it's going to be very difficult if they're not getting that home run ball. How are they scoring? Can they score in other runs? Depth is a concern for most teams. I feel pretty good about Nick Allen as a backup for shortstop and second base. Jared Kelnick and Brian De La Cruz are fine backups in the outfield. Baldwin, Leon, Casali are all good backups for catcher. Garrett Cooper is a solid backup at first base. Third base is the only spot I'm not confident in, but Nacho could be fine there. Yes, I'd love to have all-star level talent to back up each position, but that's just not realistic. So while I wouldn't call bench depth a weakness, I don't consider it a strength either. So just go ahead and thought it was appropriate to at least mention it here, because I know some people are going to talk about depth. I don't see depth as a weakness, but I wouldn't call it a strength either. I'd say all of those guys who are backing up them, as I mentioned, I think they're all fine. Not great, but not bad is how I would kind of consider the depth for this Braves team. But let me know some of your thoughts. Which area of weakness are you most concerned about for the Atlanta Braves? I'll actually get to some of your comments later. But next, I want to talk about the Braves' strengths really quickly. I think they're very obvious, and I think they are great strengths for this Braves team. And we'll also get some takeaways from Tuesday's spring training game where Chris Sale threw to Drake Baldwin. We'll get into all of that here next. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for those busy days, whether I'm snacking at my desk on a road trip or just need a quick protein booster. Always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you as always. Make it Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Solely at Locked On MLB for your second listen, getting you caught up with everything happening around spring training. Make sure you're back with us this week. We got 2 more episodes coming your way, including our weekly mailbag episode on Friday. So get your questions ready to submit there. Well, let's jump back into our discussion because I still got a lot to get to. We talked about the biggest areas of weakness. And again, I know we all as fans like to focus on that, but there's also a lot of strengths for this Atlanta Braves team. As I kind of started the podcast out talking about, they are projected to be top 5 on offense and top 5 on pitching. This Braves team is really good. You look at it position player wise, every position player is projected to finish in the top 10 at their respective position, except for shortstop and left field. I kind of said it the other way around, but this way I think sounds more impressive. They are projected, going by position, projected to finish in the top 10 at each position except for left field and shortstop. And like I said, if Profar is anything like he was last year, he's going to finish in the top 10 as well. And that includes starting pitching and relief pitching, where they're also projected to finish in the top 10. Every starting position player outside of shortstop is projected to have a WRC plus over 100. 100 is league average. So every batter in the Braves lineup is projected to be an above average hitter. I don't think many teams can say that. 4 starters are projected to have an ERA under 4. It's very good. 6 relievers are projected to have an ERA under 4. That's really good. I know we all have some PTSD from last year and all the injuries, but this is still a very deep group of very talented players who have proven themselves in the past. And I think we all have to remember that. I know last year was rough. I lived through it. I did 200 podcasts on it. It was rough. I get it. But this team and this group is still very, very capable and talented. Now, the two biggest strengths for this team, one is the power. This lineup is built to hit a lot of home runs. They've been at or near the top of the league in average exit velocity and barrel percentage over the last several seasons, even factoring in a down 2024 season. Offensively, they were fourth in all of baseball with 213 home runs. Now, that was nearly 100 fewer than what they had in a record-setting 2023 season, but I think we all can take a look back now and say that 2023 is just an outlier. Everybody stayed healthy. Everybody had a career year. Baseballs were flying more in 2023, so you knew there was going to be some regression, but still, relative to the rest of the league, they were top 5 in all of baseball in home runs hit. They've been top 3 in home runs every year since 2020. So it's really remarkable what this team can do. You can basically pencil in 90 plus home runs between Riley Olsen and Ozuna alone. Michael Harris, Acuna, Ozzy Albies will likely at least give you 20 plus home runs this year. And while hopefully they'll be a little bit more focused in scoring in different ways, we know the main function of this offense is to crush the baseball and live by the long ball. And hopefully everybody's healthy and we see that back this year. And again, even when they weren't healthy, they still did that a lot more than anybody else last year. It's going to be a part of this offense. I would just love to see a little bit more complete offense, but that is what this offense will be built on, is the long ball. Now, on the pitching side of things, what do you want in today's game? You want home runs. You want hitters that can hit home runs. You want pitchers that are going to strike out a lot of batters. We talked about how the Braves, we know they hit a lot of home runs. On the pitching side, they strike out a lot of batters as well. They led all of baseball last year with over 1,500 strikeouts, and that was without Spencer Strider. He and Sale might by themselves combine for 450 strikeouts, 425 strikeouts. Maybe 450 is too big of a number, but they're likely going to get over 400 combined strikeouts, just those two alone. We know Schwellenbach, he has the potential to have a 200 strikeout season. Lee, Bummer, Johnson, and Daysville all had K per nines over 10 last year. Perdomo had a K per nine over 13 in 2023. There's going to be a lot of swing and miss. There's going to be a lot of Ks put up on the board with this Braves pitching staff. So again, in today's era of baseball, what is the game generally dominated by? Home runs and strikeouts. The Braves do both of those things better than just about anyone. And that's why they are set up to have a lot of success this upcoming season. So I know that's very plain and very, very vanilla on the strengths, but that's what you want in today's game. And that's what the Braves do as good as anybody. But let me know, what are some other strengths that you have for this Atlanta Braves team going into 2025? Before I get into some of your comments on the strengths and weaknesses for the Braves, I do want to touch on Tuesday's spring training game. They were idle on Wednesday, so nothing to talk about there, but didn't have a podcast yesterday with the weather, so we are going to go over Tuesday's game. It was a 0-0 tie, but the Braves had one more hit, so I think they should qualify for the win. But the story of the day was Chris Sale and Drake Baldwin. Chris Sale getting the start, going 4 innings, no hits, 1 walk, no earned, 4 strikeouts. He's now pitched 6 innings in spring training, no hits allowed, 1 walk, no earned, 4 strikeouts on 80 pitches. Been very efficient. The fastball was 90-91 in the first 2 innings. He kept missing arm side early on, but then he cranked it up in the last 2 innings where he was 93-94, and then he ended his outing in the 4th inning, painting 95 at the knees for a called third strike. He averaged 94.9 miles per hour last year with the fastball. So again, it's early in spring training. He's a veteran, not really worried about it at all. He seemed to crank it up as the game went on, but certainly, with an aging pitcher like that, something you want to keep an eye on. The slider was really nasty in this one. Saw some awkward swings on the changeup as well. Not really much to take away from with Chris Sale other than he looks fantastic as he normally does. But a lot of attention in this one was on Drake Baldwin, who was catching Chris Sale after the Sean Murphy news, after all the talk of Drake Baldwin, is he going to start on opening day, which would likely be catching Chris Sale. This very well could have been the opening day lineup as well. You want to go back and give that a look. That could be the group that is going to, that will be on an opening day in San Diego on the 27th. One thing we know about Chris Sale is that he lets his catchers call the pitches. He himself has said he's never shaken a catcher off in his career, which is really hard to believe. So it was a big task for Baldwin, catching Chris Sale, calling all the pitches. Look, it is a spring training game. It is Chris Sale. He's really good at one reason he probably doesn't shake off a catcher is because it doesn't matter what he throws. He's just always been that good. But I'm not going to look too much into the pitch calling. It did seem like I mentioned that fastball he was having trouble commanding it arm side early in it. And then they really went to that slider, which, really got Chris Sale going in this one. I don't know if that was intentional from Drake Baldwin. Maybe they had a game plan set in place beforehand. They didn't tell us. But if I were watching this as a regular season game, I would have said that was smart by Drake Baldwin because Chris Sale the fastball was just off early in that one. And he went to the slider, started getting some more strikeouts, getting some swing and miss, which that's what that pitch does. But it seemed to me like maybe that's what he was doing is he saw Chris Sale didn't really have the fastball. Let's switch it up, go to the slider, kind of got that going, and then work the fastball in later in the outing. So again, don't want to read too much into it, but certainly there was a lot of focus on Drake Baldwin behind the plate. At the plate, Drake Baldwin grounded out and drew a walk. This quote from Chris Sale after the game, this was posted by Gabe Burns on X of the AJC. Chris Sale said, just seeing him on a day-to-day basis, it's fun for me because I've been here for a little while now, just seeing how people work, how people operate, how people interact with people. He's always talking about Drake Baldwin. He's always in the weight room. He has an unbelievable work ethic. He has a great routine from what I've seen. He's around all the right guys, and that's what you want from a young guy who's in position to take over a very, very important position. He isn't afraid to ask questions. He's doing all the right things, and like I said, it looks like he's starting to chisel out a pretty good routine for himself. Very likable guy too, which is great. And then Justin Toscana, also of the AJC, chimed in to point out how easy it has been to tell how much guys really like Drake Baldwin in the clubhouse. And that's big, especially for a young guy who's trying to insert himself. Catcher position as Chris Sale is very, very important. So all you're hearing is good things about Drake Baldwin early on. I think they're going to put him on that opening day roster to give him a shot with Sean Murphy injured. We'll have to see how the rest of spring training goes, but this could have been a big test for him. And from everything I could tell, he certainly passed it. Also in the game, Riley had a pair of hits. Albies was over 3 with 3 strikeouts. Again, it's spring training. I'm not going to worry about it, but some of the swings were very ugly. And honestly, that's what you see from Ozzie Albies in the regular season a lot of times. I've said it many times now about Ozzie Albies. There are times during a season he's going to want to make you pull your hair out, but when he gets going, he can carry a team for 2 to 3 weeks. Arcia made a great barehanded play on a ball that was deflected off of Chris Sale's glove, showing that good defense. Michael Harris made a great running catch up against the wall. Kelnick drew a walk in this one. I think that's always noteworthy for Jared Kelnick. Those are some of the other takeaways from the game. But again, the big thing was just watching Chris Sale and Drake Baldwin work together and kind of hearing some of those comments from Sale after the game. But let me know your thoughts on that game. What do you think about Drake Baldwin? I know we talked about on the podcast the other day. You think he's going to be the opening day catcher with Chris Sale on the mound? Let me know in the comments section down below. All right, next we'll get into some of the news for the Braves and around baseball and get to some of your comments on what you think are the biggest weaknesses and strengths for this Atlanta Braves team. We'll get into that here next. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. And I'm checking out FanDuel.com right now because I'm curious to see if Drake Baldwin has moved up in the National League Rookie of the Year race at all. And he has quite a bit, actually. He is, looks like 7th or 8th on FanDuel odds at plus 2,500. So he has come up quite a bit because I don't even know if he was on there the last time that I looked. He's behind Rhett Lauder, Tiersource Orneas for the Padres, Jordan Lawler, Bubba Chandler, Matt Shaw, Dylan Cruz, Roki Sasaki. I don't know that Drake Baldwin will get the at-bats and the opportunity to win Rookie of the Year this season, but it's pretty cool to see him moving up those odds there. Also, make sure to visit FanDuel.com/play safe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Make everyone more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I'll get into some of your comments. I asked you what you thought were the biggest strengths and weaknesses for the Atlanta Braves going into this season. A lot of you agreed with me, especially when it comes to the weaknesses. Jacob Suttle saying middle relief, infield defense as a unit. I don't agree with number 2. I thought the infield defense was great last year. I think Austin Riley is a great defensive third baseman. I know many people disagree with that because of the metrics. Matt Olson won a Gold Glove last year. I thought Ozzie looked better in the second half, and Orlando Arcia is good at shortstop. Austin says athleticism. I agree with that a little bit, or not a little bit. I just do agree with it. And it's one thing I talked about. Can you score in different ways? And I think that lack of athleticism kind of hurts him a little bit. Although Riley's a better runner than you would think. But, it's really hard to find guys outside of that. Acuna is a big part of that. And, if Acuna's in there, then suddenly you got Acuna, Harris, Albies. Like I said, Riley's a better base runner than he is a base stealer, but he has some speed. Profar's, not necessarily dead weight on the base path. It's really just Ozuna, Olsen, and Arcia and Murphy that obviously slow you down. Braves inside source, the 8th inning. Matt, the 4th, 5th, and potential 6th starter until Strider is back. Like, I don't disagree with you, Matt, but I would say most teams in Major League Baseball would consider their 4th, 5th, and 6th starters a weakness. And even the Braves' 4th, 5th, and 6th starters, I think are probably better than most teams' 4th, 5th, and 6th starters. AJ Evans, outside of he who shall not be named in the batting order, it has to be bullpen quality. So many of you saying the same things as me. Shortstop, back into the bullpen. Caden Hurd says back into the bullpen and lineup. How long is Arcia's leash if Nick Allen keeps hitting? I had somebody ask me this on Instagram as well. I'm going to try to post that there. Chris Mofield, situational hitting. Hopefully Tim Hires can help with that. Trent Helm says team health, but that's the same for every team. PJ's Braves, situational hitting with runners in scoring position, 2 strikes, bases loaded. Again, I'm hoping that Tim Hires is helping with that to improve that this year. Brian James, I'm worried about the bullpen, to be honest, not having a mentor, even though he had his days and cost us more than a few games. And Jimenez is definitely going to be impactful. Hayden Harris on base percentage. I don't expect them to lead the league like they did in 23, but there's no reason they should be in the middle of the pack in that category. I agree. I think Profar will be a big boost in that area. Another person saying health. Emmanuel, the ability to manufacture runs without the long ball, something we talked about. Scott Schweitzer, bullpen. So I think we're all pretty much on the same page. The back of the bullpen, the ability to score without the home runs, athleticism, injuries, obviously always there. I think we're all pretty much on the same page with the Braves' weaknesses. As for the Braves' strengths, Matt said, I would say the power of the lineup is the biggest strength of the team. So talking about the power for the offensive lineup there, which I agree with. Donald Langley says just a sheer amount of arms. So that's interesting. We all talk about the lack of depth for the Braves pitching, but Donald says the sheer amount of arms, which again, I don't disagree with. I just think some of those arms are a big question mark. Scott Schweitzer, who we just talked about with on the weaknesses, says the bullpen is a strength. And again, it could be. I just think there's some question marks in there. PJ's Braves, experienced players in all phases of the game. That's one I was going to write down, but I didn't. But this is now turning in from a very young, talented group to a very young, experienced veteran group that has been to the postseason several years in a row. They've had some bad experiences. Some of them have had some really good experiences in the postseason. But this is now a very experienced Atlanta Braves team that we're dealing with. So thank you so much for submitting in your responses there. Make sure you follow us on X at @LockedOn_Braves. We'll sometimes ask for your opinions and comments to be included in the show. Not a lot of news around baseball. Jose Devers was reassigned to minor league camp for the Braves, and they have 48 players left in camp. And then just wrapping up the Jose Quintana news, that deal was reported for $4.25 million with the Brewers. I would have been all over that deal. And I said it in the offseason, you get any of these guys for under $5,000, that needs to be done. And it just wasn't. I somewhat understand the reasoning for Alex Anthopoulos not doing it, but it's $4.25 million. If Jose Quintana is awful in the first 2 months, you just cut him. But I digress. He goes to the Brewers, and the Braves likely are not going to get anything else out to help the pitching staff before the season begins. Lee Carter, we need the team we had in 2021. This team and the last two iterations of this team are far better than that 2021 team, but you just got to be playing the right baseball at the right time. I would take this team over that 2021 team any other day. Mass Boost, I would take others over Quintana. Others like who? You mean other free agents or others that the Braves have? And my argument for Quintana was never that he's better than a Grant Holmes or an Ian Anderson or even an AJ Smith-Shawver. It's just, why not take the veteran for $4.25 million that you know is going to give you some innings and give some depth? I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that Jose Quintana is going to be great. It just more was for the depth that I wanted that move. If you're talking about other free agents, Mass Boost, who's left out there that you could go get? A Lance Lynn, a Kyle Gibson are the only others that come to mind. The guys that aren't signed. Maybe you're talking about guys who have already signed. Isaac Bowman, hopefully fixed this year, but plate approach was the weakness last year. Hopefully Profar provides balance. That is something that was a major weakness for this team last year that I'm hoping Profar and Tim Hires really help improve. And it's so crazy because you go back to 2023, where again, Kevin Seitzer is the hitting coach. And I thought the approaches in 2023 were really good at the plate, but last year it just seemed like there was no game plan for these hitters going to the plate. So that is something that we need to see improvement on in 2025 for sure. That will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thank you so much for joining me. Jeffrey Humphreys, Miguel Fria, Mass Boost, Gene Gordy, our Guinness in here as well, Isaac Bowman, Lee Carter. Thank you all for joining me on today's episode. Todd Twilley, strength, new hitting coach. Weakness is Snicker. Somebody who's not a Snicker fan. I do hope that Tim Hires is helpful. Isaac Bowman, what is the timetable for Strider's return? I think it's going to be third week of the regular season. If he gets a start in spring training, certainly I can't imagine they're going to hold him out more than 2 or 3 weeks in the regular season. But I think for him and Acuna, and I've said this multiple times, I think they could push them back to be ready for opening day. There's just no reason to. But I speculate third week of the season for Strider is when he's likely back. He might miss 2 or 3 starts at the beginning of the year. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Follow us on social media at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.